Well,
instances where
if you wouldn't
FEMA
mind getting
was
this
timely
committee,
and
if you
responsive
wouldn't
to
mind
people.
getting this committee, the
Unfortunately,
information and the evidence where you talk about the dysfunction of the agency and where it has really failed. That would be important to those of us who are, are appropriating dollars. And it would appear that the administration overall has a way in which they're looking at dismantling the federal government. The states will never have the amount of money because the federal government isn't going to pass that money to the states to be able to deal with what happens. It's when the federal government comes in and be able to give a hand to do that. And I think it's very clear from what you said that both yourself and the president really want to dismantle the federal government and the agencies that have provided service to the American people for decades.
At a House Appropriations Committee hearing, Representative Rosa DeLauro pressed Secretary Kristi Noem on mounting FEMA failures, warning of a creeping campaign to dismantle the very federal lifelines families depend on when disaster strikes.
Thank you so much, and I want to thank the ranking member Underwood for holding the hearing today, and welcome to you, Madam Secretary, and thank you for appearing before the subcommittee today. I just want to begin with a message to your workforce, if I might, and that's I'm grateful, very grateful for the work that they do, from search and rescue efforts of the Coast Guard to our first responders around the ground after natural disasters to those keeping us safe in the air and on the ground and at sea. I want to start with some big picture questions because I think we know very little of the details about where the $646 million cuts within FEMA's grant programs will come from. It is no secret that there are numerous reports of you, if we need to correct the record, stating that you want to, quote, eliminate FEMA within the Department of Homeland Security. I'm concerned about the direction that the administration is taking with regard to FEMA, canceling programs like BRIC, a program enacted into law by President Trump in his first term without any evidence of waste, fraud, and abuse, alongside the freezing of grants, and now 2026 budget requests targeting even more of FEMA's resources. And just right now, in terms of looking at the cancellations, the Science and Technology Directorates, Centers of Excellence, and Office of University Programs, as I mentioned, the FEMA-administered grant programs frozen virtually all grant obligations pending a review as it determines whether it will try to choke off funding for unacceptable political reasons. Resources for states and communities to respond to disasters, secure firefighting equipment, protect against terrorism, secure our ports, and much more is being held up. And as I mentioned, the cancellation of the BRIC program, funding to support hazard mitigation, reduce the toll of future disasters, save lives. That money's not going out. Research has shown mitigation efforts like BRIC save a minimum of $6 for every dollar invested and save more than double when including mitigation of economic impacts. So federal disaster relief should be readily available across the United States, regardless of where you live. Natural disasters happen everywhere. They should not be concerned about the federal government turning their back on them when they need the help the most. We need to give constituents what they need when they're facing tragedy, that they will not be stranded due to political discord. My ask of you is, what is your plan with regard to FEMA? Are you planning to eliminate FEMA? Your testimony references that you want to, quote, eliminate dysfunction of the current agency. I'm unclear, I don't know if my colleagues are clear on what you mean by dysfunction. And I'm concerned that you're causing more dysfunction within the workforce that should be preparing itself for the pending hurricane season.
Well, thank you for your question and the discussion on this topic today. President Trump has been very clear since the beginning that he believes that FEMA and its response in many, many circumstances has failed the American people, and that FEMA as it exists today should be eliminated and empowering states to respond to disasters with federal government
If you'll just,
support.
with all due respect, where is the evidence of the failure of FEMA? I don't know about everybody else on this. My state, Connecticut, was hit very, very hard with Superstorm Sandy. Every community in some way or another has been hit by that. And the FEMA on the ground, people come in, work with the families, deal with getting the funding out. Where is the evidence of the failure of FEMA?
Congresswoman, we still have claims open from Hurricane Katrina. We have fire claims that are still unpaid to people who said they were due them 7 to 8 to 10 years old. They have never been paid by FEMA. So one of the worst things that the federal government can do is to stand up in front of the American public and say, we will be there, we will walk alongside you in the most horrible time of your life, and then never follow through on it.
Well, that's
what the president has said is he's sick and tired of federal agencies that pick and choose who wins and who loses. He wants to make sure that the federal government's commitment, when it makes a commitment, that it follows through. So he's going to empower states.
The federal government is abdicating its commitment to the American people who find
themselves. It did
themselves.
certainly under Joe Biden's administration.
Let me just say this to you. The Office of Professional Responsibility. The Office of Professional, because I knew you were going to go there. As you know, FEMA's Office of Professional Responsibility, under the Biden administration, there was no evidence, no direction or agency or field leadership to discriminate against disaster victims based on political affiliation, which was a charge.
I'll follow up with you.
Well, and I will follow up. I will follow up, and I follow up with my colleagues, quite frankly, and to really listen to people whose states, communities have been devastated, and what role FEMA has played. I don't know how many millions and millions of dollars went out in Louisiana. Actually, I've asked my staff to calculate that when Katrina hit. And the response was overwhelming. And the response has been overwhelming. If you want to make corrections, that's fine. We all agree with that.
Yeah, we can point to thousands and thousands of
well, if you wouldn't mind getting this committee, the information and the evidence where you talk about the dysfunction of the agency and where it has really failed, that would be important to those of us who are appropriating dollars. And it would appear that the administration overall has a way in which they're looking at dismantling the federal government. The states will never have the amount of money because the federal government isn't going to pass that money to the states to be able to deal with what happens. It's when the federal government comes in and be able to give a hand to do that. And I think it's very clear from what you said that both yourself and the president really want to dismantle the federal government and the agencies that have provided service to the American people for decades.
This hearing wasn't just about budget lines. It was about trust. Trust in our government's ability to show up when it matters most. Representative Rosa DeLauro didn't come in swinging wildly. She came in with purpose, demanding specifics, accountability, and truth from a secretary who's pushing an agenda that could leave millions of Americans exposed the next time disaster strikes. Whether it's a hurricane, a wildfire, or a flood, FEMA is the agency that coordinates response, mobilizes emergency crews, and delivers aid when it's needed most. And yet, under this administration, FEMA is being gutted quietly, systematically, and without justification. Secretary Kristi Noem claimed the agency is dysfunctional. But when DeLauro asked for actual evidence, reports, data, case studies, concrete examples, there was nothing. No proof of widespread failure. No internal audits. No Inspector General findings. Just vague anecdotes, recycled talking points, and a dangerous ideology that treats federal emergency response as optional. And that's the real issue. What Noem and Trump are pushing isn't reform. It's demolition. It isn't about making FEMA better. It's about breaking it. Programs like BRIC, which help communities prepare before disaster strikes, are being stripped of funding. Grants that keep hospitals, ports, schools, and first responders equipped are being frozen or outright eliminated. They call it efficiency, but it's sabotage. And the consequences are not theoretical. They are immediate and personal. Because when a family loses their home to wildfire, when a farmer watches a season's worth of crops drown in floodwater, when a grandmother waits on her rooftop after a hurricane with no power, no food, and no rescue boat, it isn't the governor's office they call. It isn't a campaign rally they look to. It's FEMA, the one agency designed to step in when everything else collapses. DeLauro wasn't just defending a federal agency. She was defending a promise, the idea that in America, no one should be left to face catastrophe alone. She was defending the principle that government has a role to play in protecting its people, that when tragedy strikes, Americans should never have to wonder if help is coming or if Washington has turned its back. The stakes here aren't just about line items in a budget. They're about life and death, survival or abandonment. And unless the public wakes up to what's happening, millions of Americans could find themselves facing the next hurricane, the next flood, the next wildfire without the safety net that generations fought to build. This is an oversight. This is a warning, a roadmap of how democracy gets hollowed out, how vital institutions are dismantled not with explosions, but with cuts, freezes, and quiet bureaucratic sabotage. And if we don't speak up now, the next disaster won't just test FEMA. It will test whether our government still believes in its most basic responsibility, to protect its people. So if you believe disaster response should be about saving lives, not scoring political points, subscribe to this channel.